Decorum call?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I listened to the Republican leader speaking about the Supreme Court nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is coming before the Senate either today or tomorrow, we hope, for a confirmation vote. We have solid support for her nomination on the Democratic side, and 3 Republican senators who have announced that they will join us to make it a bipartisan majority in her favor. She is deserving of this. She has an extraordinary background. She has the kind of resume that every lawyer would dream of. To graduate from Harvard Law School and then clerk at every level of the federal judiciary, including clerk to the justice she hopes to succeed, Stephen Breyer, and then to serve on the Sentencing Commission, which is considered one of the more prestigious assignments and trying to rationalize the sentencing under federal law. And then, of course, to serve on the district court in the D.C. district and to issue some 570 or 80 different opinions, written opinions during that time, to be elevated to the D.C. Circuit Court, often called the second highest court in the land, where she served as well with distinction, and now to be the first African-American woman to be nominated to serve on the United States Supreme Court. It's an incredible record, and she has made the rounds, as they say in the Senate, visiting 95 or 96 different senators, sitting down with them privately in their offices, answering any questions or concerns that they wish to express. So I think she's an exceptional person. If you look at her record in all of these cases that she's handed down written opinions in, as I said, it's close to 600, and 100 of them were criminal cases where she imposed sentences. In some 10 or 15 of those cases, which have been highlighted by her Republican critics, related to the issue of the exploitation of children and pornography. In every single case, she imposed a prison sentence. So to argue that she's soft on crime is to ignore that reality, and to ignore the reality that she is endorsed by the largest law enforcement organization in America, the Fraternal Order of Police. She's endorsed by the International Association of Chiefs of Police and other noteworthy organizations, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, former prosecutors in the District of Columbia. She's made it very clear that when it comes to applying the law to the facts, she does it with even-handedness, so much so that she's respected by both sides of the table, the prosecutor's side of the table and the defense side of the table. That takes some doing, but she's achieved it. And that's why her selection by President Biden is the right person for the right time, for the right job. She's going to make history if we give her this confirming vote. Now, I will tell you, when you publish some 580, 600 opinions, you're going to find something in one of those opinions to raise. I listened carefully as Senator McConnell went to one of those opinions and drew his own conclusions. I'd ask him to take care in accepting that as the fair way to measure a person. People often say that in the United States Senate, they ask us, are you conservative? Are you liberal? Are you a fiscal conservative? Where do you stand on civil liberties? And people announce a position that they would like to believe they fit in. And then folks go back and look at your voting record and then say, well, how do you explain this, Senator? So in any given day, any given vote can raise a question as to a generalization about who you are and what you believe. For instance, there was a time, as hard as it may be to believe, when people were suggesting amending the Constitution of the United States to make burning an American flag a violation. Controversial. All of us revere the flag, but the notion of making this an amendment to the Constitution was a matter of great controversy and debate. I remember it well in the Senate Judiciary Committee. I came down against it, saying that I revered the flag, but the principles and values behind it were equally, if not more important to me, and so I opposed flag burning. And so did the senator from Kentucky. Yes, the minority leader, Senator McConnell. He opposed flag burning. And the organization that agreed with our position was the ACLU. Now, can I generalize from that position, which Senator McConnell took years ago, that he is an ACLU type of senator? It would be wrong to draw that conclusion. There may have been other instances where he agreed with them, but it was rare. What I'm saying is if you can take one vote and measure a senator and realize that it's far short of an accurate and honest measurement, the same thing is true for a judge. To take one opinion and say, well, she ruled against President Trump on the issue of immigration, therefore she is an activist liberal judge. She ruled as well for President Trump in other cases in his favor and ruled against Democratic presidents when they came up with their proposals before the court. So generalizations are not fair for her, for individual members of the Senate, based on one opinion, one vote, and that's what many are trying to do. I will also tell you that this notion, and it pains me to even bring it before the floor, but I know it's going to come up in the next day or two, that she is soft on crime. As I mentioned, the law enforcement groups would not be endorsing her if they believed she was soft on crime. And the notion that she somehow, in the words of one Republican senator, quote, her sentencing endangers children, it's painful because he said as much in front of her family. And I thought about that, how painful that must have been for her to hear those words. They're not true. And to take one or two situations, each of them unique in their factual circumstances, and to generalize in terms of her position on an issue of that gravity is fundamentally unfair. But we've done it too on the Democratic side, and I'm going to be first to admit, as I look back in history, there are things that should have been handled better when Republican nominees were before us. And the majority of Republican senators in the Senate Judiciary Committee, led by the ranking member, Chuck Grassley, I believe were respectful and dealt with the judge in a fair manner, asked tough questions as they were expected to, but did not cross the line into personal attack. There were 3 or 4 who broke that rule as far as I was concerned, but the vast majority of Republican senators were factual, were fair, and were basing their questions on sound legal questions before any Supreme Court nominees' consideration. That, I think, will be talked about over the next couple of days, as it should be. I'd like to, at this point, with unanimous consent, move to a separate issue in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to take a moment to thank a former member of my staff who is an extraordinary man. He's smart, he gives wise counsel, and he's truly devoted to this nation. He worked for me for years. I've worked with Eric Raven since 2014, when I became ranking member of the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense. Eric was the chief clerk of the subcommittee. The title clerk is misleading. He was the brains and the operational force behind that subcommittee. As my right hand, Eric led the massive and critically important effort to appropriate an average of $700 billion a year for our national defense budget. Incidentally, that's about half of our government's annual discretionary spending. Big assignment, the right person for that assignment. As I mentioned before, my first introduction to the Senate was many years ago as an intern to a former Illinois Senator, Paul Douglas. Douglas was a respected economist who joined the Marines at age 50, to defend democracy in World War II. Badly wounded, became a war hero, then was elected to the Senate. Douglas famously said, "You don't have to be a wastrel to be a liberal." Douglas fought against waste in government because he understood that every misspent dollar weakens our national defense. Every wasted dollar undermines our ability to build a better future. Well, I think Paul Douglas would have liked Eric Raven. Eric has been a stalwart ally in my efforts to advance our national defense while also protecting taxpayers' dollars and investing in things like defense medical research, domestic sourcing of the components critical to our defense industrial base. I traveled with Eric to more places than I can remember. There was one particularly eye-opening visit to a classified facility in a desert outside Las Vegas. You might say it was out of this world. I'll also remember a trip we made to Poland and the Baltics in 2018, where we discussed the danger of over-reliance on Russian gas and other issues. Today we see that playing out tragically in Ukraine. It was always a relief to have Eric at my side. His deep institutional knowledge, his sense of humor, his black bag full of secrets have served me and the committee and America well. I know that Senator John Tester of Montana, the new chair of that same subcommittee, and other senators with whom Eric worked share my high regard for him. In his 20 years in the Senate, Eric has worked for Senator Dianne Feinstein, the late Senator Ted Kennedy, Robert Byrd, Senator Inouye, our former colleague Senator Mikulski, and the current chairman, Senator Leahy. To countless Senate staffers along the way, Eric has been a mentor, a cheerleader, and always a friend. In addition to his public service, he's a pilot and a black belt in karate, enjoys golfing, running, devoted husband to his wife Ann, father to his 7-year-old son Edward. And very soon, pending Senate approval, he will be our nation's next Undersecretary of the Navy. The Senate's loss is the Navy's and America's gain. I'm confident that Eric will excel in his new challenge just as he has in the Senate. I wish him the very best of luck and thank him for his outstanding service. Mr. President, I ask consent that the next statement I make be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, it's been almost 6 years since the disastrous collapse of the infamous for-profit college chain ITT Tech. At that time, ITT Tech was one of the largest chains of for-profit colleges in the country. 130 campuses spread over 38 states and 40,000 students enrolled. It closed its campuses 2 weeks after the Federal Department of Education barred the parent company from enrolling any more students using federal aid dollars. I've come to this floor countless times to talk about the deceptive, predatory, desperate tactics of the for-profit college industry at large. At the peak of its profitability, 2000 to 2003, it was the hottest sector on Wall Street. Publicly traded shares in for-profit colleges rose 460%, according to one analysis. In 2010, these for-profit colleges swept up more than $32 billion in federal student aid dollars. Hundreds of millions more flowed in through the GI Bill. For IT Tech, the total haul in federal dollars that year reached $1.1 billion. 6 years later, the whole Tech House of Cards collapsed in a cloud of scandal, leaving students and taxpayers holding the bag. Now, a new report reveals disturbing facts about ITT Tech, their deception, their high-pressure recruiting tactics, and other forms of fraud and abuse they use to rack up massive profits. The report's entitled Dreams Destroyed: How ITT Technical Institute Defrauded a Generation of American Students. What makes this new report particularly damning is that the details of these abuses came not only from defrauded students, but from the company's own recruiters and top executives. Like the internal company memos that finally shed light on the inner workings of the tobacco industry, the ITT records reveal a damning prioritization of profit over everything else. 2 years before ITT Tech's collapse, the country's disgraced CEO, Kevin Modany, wrote in an email to his marketing chief, "I do not have anything more important on my agenda. Recruitment is my personal top priority." Prospective students were lied to, bombarded with high-pressure tactics to get them to enroll and sign up for more and more and more student loans. One former ITT Tech recruiter compared the working conditions to a sweatshop, where all that mattered was hitting a quota. Appallingly, recruiters were instructed to use the pain funnel, they called it, a set of 8 questions designed to reveal every prospective student's vulnerabilities. By identifying a student's pain points, such as working at a dead-end job or feeling unappreciated, recruiters were trained to exploit that pain and present ITT as the solution to this poor child's problems. ITT Tech then inflated grades, falsified attendance record to keep students enrolled so they could squeeze more federal dollars and more student debt for the kids. The company routinely falsely filed financial aid forms, including stealing student passwords, signing financial aid forms without the student's knowledge or consent. The list goes on and on. The result, Modany, the ITT shareholders, made millions. Taxpayers got ripped off. Students ended up holding the bag with worthless diplomas if they finished, but a mountain of student debt whether they finished or not. What did Mulvaney think about the students he was defrauding? Look at his words. This is the man who was the executive who was doing this to these children. He said, "Take off the gloves with the student. Slug back. Do not hold back in any way. And anything that we can put out there to question the legitimacy of his complaint, we should most definitely do so. We need to call him out publicly." That's the kind of respect they had for these students. And many of these kids, as the majority leader knows, were first-generation college students. Their mothers and fathers were so proud that they were at ITT Tech College. They made it into college. Mom and dad thought they'd have to work extra hours, but it would be worth it. It was a fraud from start to finish, a fraud on American taxpayers and a terrible fraud on these students and their families. Mr. President, I see that the majority leader's on the floor here, and I have a few more pages that I'm going to put into the record on this subject. I have been talking about for-profit colleges for a number of years. Luckily, we have a president and a Secretary of Education who are putting watchmen in place, guardians of students in place, who believe that it's more important that kids are treated fairly and honestly than it is for some executive to make millions of dollars off of an abuse of the system. And I ask consent the rest of my statement be entered into the record.
Without objection.
I yield the floor.